Hi everyone, so I am talking about my mid-month wrap-up. These are all the books that I gave 4 stars or more to. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Vivid by Beverly Jenkins. This one here I gave 4 stars. And this one here has to do with, she is pretty much like, I'd say the first black doctor. And also she's a female doctor. So we've got Dr. Vivica, they call her Vivid, Lancaster, and Nate Grayson. So for me, with this series, even though this book was written before Indigo, I would say definitely read Indigo first, because that takes place 20 years before this story. So if you want to go like in the way of the storyline, you would read Indigo first, because that has to do with the Underground Railroad. This is 20 years later. They're still dealing with like Jim Crow laws and all that stuff. So they're in that town. I can't remember. It's like Grayson. I think it's Grayson something. But it's like the Grayson family owns this town. So she ends up getting this opportunity to go to their town to be the doctor. So what she doesn't count on is the fact that the guy who picks her up has no idea she's a female. So this here starts off where right away you're already introduced to how black people were treated during that time, because she goes onto this train to take to that town, and because she's black and she's sitting in this coach, there's some white people who don't feel comfortable with her being in the same coach as them. So unfortunately, the person who is the conductor has to tell her that she has to leave, even though she paid for the freaking seat. She has to leave and sit somewhere else. So she ends up sitting in this other car, and it's got other like black people in the car and stuff like that. And you know, it's in an area obviously that's not very comfortable. So she was befriending them and being really nice, and everyone's really like respectful toward her and was like helping her out and stuff. So I thought that was really nice. And then she lands in this town. I can't remember what it's called. It's something, I think it's Grayson something. And she meets Nate, and he's like, no. He's like, no, this is a female. I do not want a female coming to this town, because he knows how a lot of these women are. They don't stick around. They don't stick around the town, because in the wintertime it gets super cold, and he just figures she's not going to last, you know. So he already is like, oh no, she's a female, you know, she's not going to last. So I think it was his what is his aunt? I think it was his aunt that had basically got her to come, and didn't say anything to him about, you know, her being a female. So I liked this story. I thought it was really cute. It was sweet. You know, she of course is, you know, trying to prove herself. Her family, she comes from, I'd say she comes from a little bit of more class. You know, she has, it's a working class family that has been able to prosper. So her father is a former slave. Her mother had a title, was, you know, had money. And because her mother and the father fell in love, the family basically disowned the mother. But they were able to prosper on their own, and they were doing really well. So they had, you know, more money, so that, you know, their children, of course, were able to have more privilege, you know, because they came from, you know, some money. So Grayson, you know, Nate Grayson's, he's the mayor of the town. You know, he runs it. His whole family has basically been there for many years. And he feels very responsible for, you know, obviously the town and the people that are in it. And he wants to make sure that, you know, they have a doctor that they can depend on, you know, because the other doctor that they usually go to is a little farther away and all that stuff. And the person's like up there in age, you know, so he wants someone who can be in the town and, you know, be able to take care of his, you know, residents and stuff. So they kind of start off on the wrong foot. They start off on the wrong foot. He sees the amount of luggage that she has, and he's just like, "Oh Lord." So, you know, it was a lot of essentials, you know, for her. So she, you know, you could tell that they're attracted to each other, but they don't want to admit that they are. Then she goes and she befriends his cousin Eli, which they have a past that is kind of explained in here, so you know what happened. But Eli Grayson is definitely more of a flirt. He works, he's trying to get like the local newspaper going, you know, he's a reporter and all that stuff, you know, or journalist, whatever you would say. And it's funny because I'm not a political person, but one thing Beverly Jenkins does is she tends to bring in politics from back in that time, you know, like you had the Democrats and the Republicans arguing with each other, you know, especially during that time. And I will say, like, when you have someone who is considered on this side, their facts and stuff like that kind of centers on their rhetoric, you know, and then you have the other side and their facts aligns with their side. So to me, it's like, I always want to be like, okay, there's your truth, and the truth. So I want to get to the truth. And this is the thing when it comes to political parties, is all of them lie. All of them lie, bullshit, try to manipulate facts and, you know, all that stuff. So for me, you had the cousin Eli is a Democrat, which everybody was pretty much like, he's a Democrat, because everyone else was pretty much Republican. And so she did a little bit of talking of that in this book. And I'd say if you're not a fan of that, you may want to like skip over all of that stuff. She kind of sprinkles in a little bit of her book where she talks about time periods and like maybe politicians coming into power, things like that. And then you know, Democrats, Republicans, things like that. So I'd say, like, because our time right now in our society is a little touchy when it comes to politics, you may want to skip over some things. I'll just say that. For me, I was kind of like, when she started, like, you know, I was listening to the audiobook, and when I was hearing like Democrat, Republican, I'm just like, oh. I'm like, I can't escape this shit. So I kind of like, you know, was trying to like ignore it and then move on with the story. So I did like the romance. It was a sweet romance. You have these characters who don't really kind of like each other, even though they are attracted to each other, and they slowly start to fall for one another. And then you've got like drama coming in because, you know, different stuff happens, and, you know, there's like different things that happen with, you know, like her, like she gets kind of like threatened and stuff like that. So there's different stuff that happens in the story that I don't want to give everything away. But, you know, and there's some like animosity between Nate and Eli. You end up finding out this in the book and all that stuff. So I would say, as I said before, definitely read Indigo first, because the characters of Hester and Galen are in here briefly. They're briefly in Vivid. But you definitely want to know the story of Indigo first before you delve into Vivid. So I did like that one. And then I went into the second book that was in the series. I ended up reading Jewel. So this one here is Eli's story. So we got Eli Grayson and what's her name again? Because I wrote it down. Jewel, yeah. Hence the title. So Jewel was introduced in Vivid, and you understand what happened with her in there and all that stuff. This here is Eli is trying to open up. There was a newspaper building. He's trying to open it up and start a newspaper. So he's trying to get a backer, someone to help him and give him money, because he went and like took out like these loans and stuff like that to try to get things going for himself. And so he needed someone to kind of help him out and give him, you know, a little bit of money to help back the newspaper. So the guy comes in and is like, you know, okay, I'm going to give you a shot, but you need to go and invite your wife to a dinner, and we need to go and, you know, I want to meet your wife. And Eli's like, wife? Because he's like, this guy was a playboy. This guy was a total playboy, has slept around with a lot of women. You know more in Vivid what happened. I'm not going to spoil that. But this one here is, like I said, you got to read Vivid first to understand the story a little bit more, and then delve into this one. So Eli's kind of scrambling like, oh crap, I have to have a wife? Because the guy's like, I don't trust bachelors. I don't trust bachelor men. I want someone who shows that they could be committed to, you know, if I give them money. So Eli's like, crap, what am I going to do? So he goes to Jewel and is like, Jewel, you need to help me out. Can you please help me out? And she's at first like, heck no, I'm not helping you out, you know? Like, heck no, Eli, I know how you are. And so she kind of gives him a little bit of a hard time, and he manages to convince her to pretend to be his wife just for like the dinner, you know, and then, you know, he will like help her out. Well, what happens is, ends up getting discovered that, you know, the guy who was the person who was, you know, going to give him money had basically spilled the beans and said, hey, you know, they're married. And everybody in the town is looking like, what? So now they're like, crap, we need to get married because it looks bad on her. It will be, you know, like a stain on her name if she looks like, you know, that they're not actually engaged and married. So they actually get married, and it's their romance of like coming to get to know each other, and you know, it's like a friends to lovers type of thing. And I really liked this one too. That's why I ended up giving this one 4 stars as well. Was because of that. Let's see. Also, there is, who shows up to, in this book, is Grayson had, Nate Grayson had a wife in the first book, Vivid. He had talked about he had a wife, and the ex-wife betrayed him. In this book here, Nate Grayson's ex-wife shows up, and it causes problems between Eli and Jewel. So there also is a murder in here. I'm not going to say who gets murdered, but there's a murder in here. So I did like these stories, you know, reading about Vivid, and, you know, Vivica and Nate's story, and then delving into his cousin and his story. And it was really sweet. I did like these ones here. I do like the cover, though, too. But yeah, I did like these ones here. And I tried to get into a couple of other Beverly Jenkins, but I wasn't really feeling them. So I decided to put them down, and I decided to get into like something else. So those ones there are nice stories, but I will say, like, it has like every one of Beverly Jenkins' stories, like at least these ones that I've read so far, kind of has like this hint of sadness, because, you know, you're either talking about the Underground Railroad that helped free slaves, and then you're talking about the other one. What was I talking about again? Oh God, I'm forgetting the name. Whatever. Jim Crow. That's what it is. Jim Crow time, where things were not great in that time period with the laws and all that stuff, you know. So they do have a hint of sadness to them, because, you know, you're hearing about these stories and it just kind of like, you know, makes you sad, you know, hearing about them. But I still enjoyed the love stories, though. I liked the way Beverly Jenkins had these characters where you could see them starting to fall for each other. And her books are not like, they're not highly sexualized, but they're very sensual. I'll just say that. They're very sensual and, you know, add like, you know, they're very passionate. You know, like there's a difference between like Fucking and making love, that type of thing. I'd say Beverly Jenkins' characters are like making love and they're not Fucking. So there is a difference. So I did like those stories right there. I thought they were pretty good. I will eventually go back to Beverly Jenkins, but I just wanted to take a little bit of a break. You know, want to take a little bit of break. It's a little, it could be a little sad, you know, listening to them, but they were good. I did really enjoy them. So I decided to delve into Tessa Dare. So there was a couple of books by Tessa Dare. You'll see them on my sour reviews, like, you know, my salty reviews. There were a couple of books in the Spindle Cove series that I really was not a fan of. But I will say, I delved into book 3. It was A Lady by Midnight. This is the third book in the Spindle Cove series. And this one here has Kate Taylor. And Kate Taylor was raised, she was raised at this school, like home for like, you know, for girls and stuff. And she has like these vague memories of like her past, but she doesn't really remember much. It's like very vague. She remembers a song and different things like that, but she doesn't really remember much. So she ended up like graduating from that school and was essentially like a piano teacher. She was a music teacher. And so she's staying and living in Spindle Cove. Well, Corporal Thorn, his name is Samuel, Corporal Thorn, him and his men had, you know, came into Spindle Cove with the first book. And so Corporal Thorn, blah, blah, blah. Corporal Thorn has been in Spindle Cove for about a year. And so he's been kind of like watching her. He's kind of more of a grumpy type of character, kind of keeps to himself, but, you know, he's been watching her for, you know, a time. And then all of a sudden, this weird kind of family comes in, and they're essentially telling Kate, like, hey, we think that you are our long lost cousin. Well, we come to find out their cousin ended up having an affair with this woman who was, you know, untitled. So she's more of a, you know, like the children become like byblos and bastards, things like that. So they end up having that to where, you know, the girl is like, they're not titled. So they're not entitled to, like, obviously money or anything like that. Or, you know, like back in the day, obviously, you know, if they're the bastard children, then they have more of a bad name, which is messed up because these kids didn't ask to be born, you know? And it's like, you messed up and had children without being married or with a mistress. Why should the children get punished for the parents' mistake, you know? That was messed up. So anyways, Kate ends up finding out that her parents, it was essentially, she was a byblow. And the woman who basically was like her, almost kind of like the teacher, like the higher up lady who was running the school, really nasty woman. It just made me feel sorry for Kate, because it's like all she wanted was just a family and someone to love her. And finally she has this family that comes forward and says like, hey, we think you're our cousin, and you know, we're here to like help you out. So Corporal Thorn sees this and he's like, I don't trust these charlatans. I don't trust these people. These people can't be trusted. And so he decides to pretend to be Kate's fiance, so that way he can keep an eye on her. So there are secrets in this book that end up being discovered. I don't want to kind of give it away, but for me, I did like this book. I ended up giving it 4 stars, but I did feel like Kate, in a sense, there were times that she was very stubborn, and there were times that I felt like she was a little bit of the damsel in distress kind of thing, and that kind of irritated me slightly, a little bit. And I will say, man, Corporal Thorn, he frustrated me to no end. So I had said, you know, he felt very unworthy of Kate. You know, he had, you know, obviously feelings for her for a long time. And that's the thing that I really kind of like irritated me about him, is that he pined for her, but then he didn't feel like he was good enough for her. And then he did the whole thing where was it in my thing that I wrote down? Let me see. Yeah, he did the whole thing of like, I know what's best for you, so I'm going to sacrifice my kind of like happiness and love so that way you can have a better life. And I'm like, dude, you know, I'm like, why? I hate that. I hate that. Where it's like, I'm not good enough for you. I'm unworthy of you, even though he already slept with her, you know. And it's like, dude, you already compromised her, man. And now you're like, I'm not worthy of her. That frustrated me. Even though I still like the book, but that frustrated me. This character. I was just like, dude. And I will say that there is a dark tone in this book that you have to kind of be aware of. When you find out more of Kate's past, it is a darker tone. When you learn of like what happened to her mother and all that stuff, it is more of a darker tone in the book. So just be aware of that. But otherwise, like, you know, I really enjoyed this book. There was a caretaking scene in here where Corporal Thorn had gotten injured by a snake because he was trying to like bat it away from, like, she had this dog that he had given to her, and the dog was cute, but he ended up like shooing the snake away, and the snake ended up biting him. So it was a caretaking scene in here where he was kind of like confessing certain things, and it was really sweet. And I was like, oh, he actually showed his heart there. And that's what I liked about the book, was that caretaking scene. That kind of like, you know, that reinforced to me, like, he is a good guy. He, you know, he really does love her, even though he doesn't want to show it and he doesn't think he's worthy of her. But I did really like that scene. I thought it was really sweet. So yeah, ultimately I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I did enjoy this one. But I will say the standout for me, the best one I think in this series so far, is this one. Even though I didn't give it 5 stars, I gave it 4 because there were like a few things in it that kind of bothered me a little bit. But other than that, I really enjoyed this one. I would say like this one here is probably the best one of the series, in my opinion, you know. So I ended up reading Any Duchess Will Do by Tessa Dare. Now this one here, I'd say I probably like more because there's a class difference in this, and I think that's why I liked it more, because I love class differences. So we've got Pauline Sims and Griffin York. He's the Duke of Halford. So we've got, of course, class differences. This is a little bit of Insta-lust, and that's probably why I gave this 4, is because it is a little bit of Insta-lust, where this love story took place within a span of a week, and I'm just like, come on. It was a little far-fetched. So with stories like that, I'm like, I just wanted to draw just a little bit more, you know, and then, you know, some stories I can be like, okay, within a few days, okay, you know, but this one here, I'd say, that's why I settled on a 4, because it was like just a little bit of insta-lust. So Pauline Sims is essentially a serving girl. She has no title, and she takes care of her sister, Daniela. And Daniela, I would consider to be mentally challenged. You know, there's other terms in here that they use for her. Like, they don't use the R word, but they still use, like, what's the term that they used in her? Simple? I don't know. But it was like, you know, different terms you don't use today. Like, I say mentally challenged, you know, person who is a little slower, you know, than other people. So she takes care of her sister, and I would essentially say, like, her sister had probably a little bit of, I'd say, autism tendencies. Like, she liked, you know, a routine. She liked routine. She liked being in the same place all the time. So I would say, like, she did have tendencies of autism, you know, but I would say mentally challenged, because I wouldn't say that she's autistic, because, you know, I'm not a doctor. So I'm not, you know, trying to evaluate the character, but I'd say she definitely had, like, autistic tendencies in here. And Pauline is working as, like, this, you know, server at this pub. And the Duke, you know, Griffin, the Duke and his mother end up showing up at this pub. Now, his mother's funny. She kidnaps her own son, you know, drugged him, you know, put him in the carriage. You know, obviously she had help. And put him in the carriage, and it's like, no, you're getting married. You're choosing a wife and you're getting married, because I'm tired of this. So they go to Spindle Cove. And he's just like, mother, you know, really? And so he's like, okay, well, I'm going to pick my own wife. So he chooses Pauline. Like, you know, here you go, mother. Here's a thing that you can do. Train her to be a duchess. So what happens is Pauline leaves, but she says, I can only leave her a week, because I don't want to be that long away from my sister. You know, I promised my sister I would not be gone that long. So they leave for, you know, a week. And in the meantime, you know, Griffin is instantly attracted to her. You know, he's attracted to her. He wants her. And it doesn't take that long before, you know, he gets into her panties. She's not a virgin. So, but I really like this one, because it's the class difference, you know, like them getting to know each other and different things like that I liked. Is, you know, him, you know, getting to know her and realizing, you know, things about her that he just finds, you know, incredible. I will say, like, the author, I felt like, watched the movie Pretty Woman, because there was a scene in here that I was like, this is Pretty Woman. And I'm like, this is definitely Pretty Woman, where she goes into this bookstore, and this guy who runs the bookstore doesn't treat her very well. So she leaves, you know? So there's a part in the book where Griffin and her go into the same bookstore, and she's like, I can't be in there. I can't be there. And the guy told me to leave. And he's like, really? Okay. So we go in, and he's like, oh, you know, this is my mother's assistant. You know, why did you tell her to leave? And it was like, almost like basically Pretty Woman, where he's like, oh, we're going to buy all these books and do all this other stuff. And then he's like, you know what? Take that list, and we're going to go to your competitor, because we don't want to spend your money, you know, spend money here. So it kind of reminded me a bit of, like, there's two scenes in Pretty Woman where she goes back into that one store where she got told to leave because she, you know, she didn't look right and all that stuff. And so she was like, oh yeah, do you remember me? Yeah, look at me now, kind of a thing. And like, big mistake, big, huge. And she walks away. I love that scene. So that was kind of like in here where it's like you went in there just to kind of show off and then you left, you know, so you didn't give them anything of a commission. And then, you know, you've got that other scene in Pretty Woman where he goes into this, you know, to this store and it's like, we're going to spend a lot of money here. So you better start kissing our ass. So this kind of reminded me of that. And I was like, man, did she watch Pretty Woman before she wrote this book? Because that was definitely a scene. And I'd say this definitely reminds me of, oh, what's that one? Is it called Funny Girl? I think it's that one where, I think it's got Audrey Hepburn in it, and she is like, you know, hello, governor, you know, she's got like this really thick, you know, like Cockney type of accent, you know, where it's not like distinguished, you know. And so he's essentially like taking her off the streets to, you know, to train her to be a lady and all that stuff. Was it called My Fair Lady? I think, if I remember correctly. I'll have to go and like put it like right here. But it kind of reminds me of that too, where it's kind of like you're taking this girl off the streets and you're teaching her to be more of a duchess, you know. So I like this. And also the mother wasn't that like really snooty. She was like, you know, oh, well, you have to like sit up straight and things like that. But she wasn't a real nasty harpy. Like you could have seen like this, you could have seen like maybe her being like really nasty, but she wasn't. And I really liked his mother. But there is like a trigger warning in here. There is talk of infant death in here. And oh man, just like the talks of with the character explaining what happened to the child. It was heartbreaking. I felt so sorry for the character. I don't want to say who it is, but I felt so sorry for the character. And I was like, oh, that's just so sad. But, you know, back in that time, a lot of babies died, you know, like sickness and things like that, you know, because obviously, you know, today we have things like, you know, getting children with, you know, immunizations and all that stuff, like for like, you know, tuberculosis and all that, because people would die of like tuberculosis. You know, it's what they would call consumption back in the day. So, you know, that's why we go and we get shots for like tuberculosis and, you know, polio and all this other stuff, you know. So, that part was sad. But I'd say like this is probably my favorite book of that series. This one here, the last one, is probably my favorite. And so, you know, I feel like, you know, Tessa Dare gets better with her books. Like the first book I read from her, I wasn't really impressed with it. And I kind of like DNF'd it. And then I moved on to the second book and I wasn't really impressed with that one either. And I'm like, oh crap, I don't really like this series. And then when I got to the third book, you know, which was The Lady by Midnight, that one I enjoyed. I did enjoy that one. And then this one here was the best one in my opinion. I really liked this character. I really liked Griffin, you know, and I really liked how he treated, you know, Pauline, you know, and they're, you know, happily ever after and all that stuff. I liked this one a lot. This one was pretty good. So there's that. Okay, so the last book I want to talk about is, this is Say Yes to the Marquess by Tessa Dare. This is the second book in the Castles Ever After. This is basically a series where all of these women end up with these castles. So, this one here, Cleo, it's a weird name, Cleo, ended up with this castle. Now, her and Pierce, what's his name? Pierce Brandon. Her and Pierce Brandon had basically got together or got engaged when she was like 17. And it's more of like a family thing where it's like kind of bringing the families together. And he's been off in who knows where. And, you know, it's been rumored that he's, you know, had mistresses and he's gotten like his mistresses pregnant. Rumor is he's got 4 kids. And so she's been waiting for him to marry her for 8 freaking years. So, you know, during that time, it's like, you know, you don't wait that long, you know, to get engaged. So she's pretty much like a laughing stock at this point that, you know, her fiance doesn't look like he wants to marry her. So she decides to take things into her own hands, and she goes to London to meet up with his brother Rafe. Now, Rafe is more of the black sheep of the family. His father didn't approve of different things, and he's always been kind of can't keep to himself. The only thing I can think of, because he's been called stupid for years, the only thing I can think is that maybe he's got like ADHD, and that's why he can't sit still. And, you know, can't concentrate on things for long before he's like going off and, you know, doing other things. He needs to like work off, you know, all his energy he has, so he goes for runs, and he ended up turning into a prize fighter, you know, taking like all of his anger, you know, that he felt toward his father and his brother, and use it toward prize fighting. So he very much, I could say, Rafe very much has a lot of daddy issues. You know, his father not spending enough time with him, you know, kind of doting on the other son more. And so he definitely has, like, even though he wants to look out for his brother, he definitely has, like, this animosity toward his brother. And so Cleo goes to him and is like, Rafe, you've got to get me out of this, you know, arrangement. I don't want to do this anymore. She's like, I have, you know, a castle now. She's like, I want to go, and she wants to set up basically she wants to set up a brewery on her castle grounds and create like these Hoffields, you know, where you create the Hoff, you know, to make the beer and all that stuff. So she wants to do that. She's learned all of this different stuff over the years. You know, this is one thing that her mother kind of like taught her is like, you know, learn as much as you can about different things, you know, and, you know, go and like read as much as you can so you're not, you know, so you know all this stuff and you can have conversations with your husband and all that stuff. So she's learned all of these different things, and she's like, the stuff that I've learned, I want to use it towards something. I don't want to go and be married to Pierce, you know. He doesn't seem like he's interested in marrying me, so I want to go on and, you know, do something for myself. So, I mean, I understand where she's coming from, you know. It's like this guy just keeps, like, doing his own thing. Meanwhile, she's supposed to wait for him, you know, and wait for him to finally decide to get married. You know, so that's why for her, I'm like, good for her for like taking it in her own hands. So Rafe's like, no. He's like, no, I'm not signing it. You're going to get married. I will help you get married. So he goes to her castle and proceeds to, you know, get dresses, get, you know, cake and different things like that. And he essentially starts to seduce her, you know, because he starts saying things to her, you know, like when she'd say like, you know, she's curvy, and her mother was not a good woman, you know, with the stuff that she basically told her daughter was like, you're too curvy, you need to be thinner, you need to know all this stuff. And if she didn't know, like, her and her mom would play this, what they call game. And to me, I'm like, that's torture. Her mother would essentially ask her these questions at dinner and say, if you answer anything wrong, I will take a piece of food away from you. Yeah. And take away sweets for her to eat. Like, oh, you can't have that dessert, you know, and different things like that. And I'm just like, wow, this woman was horrid. Her mother was just frustrating. So she doesn't think that she's good looking, you know, she thinks she's curvy. And so he's like, you know, basically telling her, you're beautiful, you know? He's giving her all of these things that a fiance would do. You know, all of these things that a fiance or a husband would do to make her feel, you know, wanted and more, you know? And so he essentially seduces her, and he's not even realizing he's doing it. You know, in the back of his mind, he's still like, you know, no, she needs to be the wife for Pierce. And it's like, dude, your brother don't care. He obviously doesn't care if he's been out gallivanting for 8 freaking years. He doesn't seem like he cares at all, you know? So that's the thing that kind of irritated me about Rafe, is that it was like all this time, you know, he was like, no, I need to have her for Pierce, even though this guy's been in love with her for years. Rafe's been in love with her for years. And he's just like, no, I gotta be honorable. And it's like, dude, no. He frustrated me. He really frustrated me. I did enjoy the book, but Rafe frustrated me to no end, of like just his constant, you know, like, I need to go and, you know, make sure I don't steal, you know, my brother's girl away. And I'm like, dude, steal her away. Your brother ain't gonna freaking care, you know? So, I really liked, there was different scenes in here that I liked. One of the scenes I liked was he shows her to this area. He shows her to this area where he's like, oh, well, you know, here's like, you know, this orchestra playing, you know, I brought all these people here, you know, so that way you could choose, like, if you like this type of music at your wedding. And then he goes and leads her into basically the kitchen area, where it has all of these cakes. And he's like, here, sample these cakes. And she's like, no, I don't want to sample these cakes. He goes, you're going to sample these cakes. So he tries to feed her, and she goes and she kind of gets back at him. And they almost kind of have a food fight, where she's, you know, they finally get down to the ground, and she's feeding him like this, like, it was kind of like a plum cake. I think it was a plum cake. She's like stuffing it in his face, and that was funny to me. I just was like, good for you, girl. You know, it's like, you're like, no, well, you're gonna eat it too, you know. And for him, because he's a prize fighter, he's like, no, I can't have sweets, you know, I can't do any of that stuff, especially when I'm training for a fight. And so I liked that scene a lot. I thought it was really cute. I started laughing at it. And you know, there was just different stuff that he did that I was like, dude, you clearly are in love with this woman. You know, like, her family, like, I liked her sister Phoebe. I liked her sister. Her sister Phoebe, I'd say Phoebe was probably more, like, in the category of, like, autistic in a way, to where she had certain ways of doing things, and she was really smart. And so she definitely was one of the types of people where it's like, you need to have someone special to marry her, because she would just be miserable if she was married to just some random guy, you know. She has to have someone special for her, because she was just so unique. I liked Phoebe. Now, her other sister, on the other hand, was annoying. I did not like her at all. And I didn't like, what was her name? Oh God, what was her name? Anyways, her other sister was annoying, and her sister's husband was annoying. He kept calling her, like, dumpling. Kept calling her dumpling. This is a woman who already feels like she's overweight, you know, and stuff like that. And she's got curves. She doesn't like those curves. And now this man's calling her dumpling. Yeah. So I didn't like that guy. And it was funny because there was a scene where Rafe was like, he did not like the things that he was saying to Cleo, and he punched him out. He had punched him in the face and knocked that guy out. And I'm like, good for you. But yeah, I did like this story. But yeah, I will say, like, Rafe frustrated me so much. And I was like, dude, stop. You are in love with this woman. You know, and you're still going to want to have her married to your butthole brother who don't even care? You know, and if the rumors are true that he's got fucking how many byblows, how many bastards, you're going to have her get married to some dude who supposedly has 4 kids? Come on, man. So yeah, that was the thing that frustrated me about him, was that. But otherwise, I really enjoyed the book. I did really like it. And that's why ultimately I ended up giving it 4 stars, because I did really enjoy that one. And yeah, I liked her independence where she wanted to do beer making. And I was like, good for her, you know, good for her for, you know, trying to be independent and do things on her own and not have to, you know, wait for some man to marry her, you know. She's like, hey, I got my own castle now. I could do what I want, you know, kind of thing. And even though she kind of lacked confidence, and Rafe kind of like pushed her to have that confidence, you know, to build her up. That was the thing I liked about him, was that, trying to build her up. But he frustrated me though. You know, he just really frustrated me. But yeah, anyways, that's it for this one here. I'm really trying to get through all of my Tessa Dares. I will say, like, there's been 4 Tessa Dares that I've read so far. Wasn't really a fan of. I was not really a fan of. But some of the other ones I really did like. So she's kind of like, she's probably one of those authors where she's hit or miss for me, where it's like some books I like from her and some books I don't like from her. So we will see the next time she decides to release a book. But I have 2 more books of hers that I have physical copies of that I want to go and finish those ones up. And then I'm going on to, I believe I'm going to go on to Sarah MacLean, because I have a bunch of books by Sarah MacLean that I want to go and listen to and get through those. And then I have some Julia Quinn I want to get through, and the rest of the Kerrigan Byrne books that I want to get through those. And then I have, there's other books that are audiobooks that I have that I want to listen to. Oh, Lorraine Heath. I found some Lorraine Heaths on AnyPlay, and I want to listen to those ones on there too. So once I get through all of these other ones, I will delve into Lorraine Heath, because there's how many books that I have of hers that I really need to get through. And I do like Lorraine Heath. I haven't read her in years, but I do like her. I think the last book I read from her, I wasn't really a big fan of, but all of her other books I did like. You know, her earlier works and stuff like that, I did like them. So yeah, I'm going to get through those ones too. But I really have not been interested in like contemporary romances lately. A lot of them I haven't really been enjoying. So I've been just trying to get through my physical copies that I have. And I found like how many of them on AnyPlay. So it's easier for me to listen to them through audiobook, because then like when I'm doing my dishes, I can listen to the book. When I'm doing my walks, I can listen to the book. If I'm going and I'm sitting down in bed, maybe I'm playing a game on my tablet, I can go and listen to this book. It's easier for me to get through these books much quicker than it is for me to like physically read them, because sometimes I get tired. Like I'm reading and then all of a sudden I start falling asleep because I'm physically reading this book. But I still try to get through my other physical copies, like, you know, maybe there's like a book I don't have on audiobook that I can go and physically read, and then at night I can try to, you know, maybe go and read something on Kindle if I can, and kind of go from there. But yeah, that's it for this video here. Have yourselves a good day. Take care of yourselves, be kind to each other, and I will see you all on the next video. All right, bye.